With years of experience in guiding individuals through their recovery and healing journeys, Nisha Patel believes that life is about rediscovering oneself and embracing a life filled with meaning and joy. In today's episode, we'll dive into Nisha's own story of resilience and recovery, explore the tools and strategies she uses to empower others, and discuss how finding purpose can be a powerful catalyst for lasting change. Through personalized coaching, workshops, and community support, she has transformed countless lives, encouraging others to reclaim their narratives and step into their true potential. Welcome, Nisha Patel, to Mystical Sisterhood. I'm so excited to have you here. I always give a shout out to where I have met the guest or who referred me, but we just met recently in Dara Brewstein's Coaches Unite group. And I think we probably shared space in Mind Your Business as well, but may not have been as aware of it. So I feel like a recent podcast with Nandi Wise, we talked about how souls kind of circle and dance around each other and they come together when they're meant to. So thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure getting to know you thus far, and I'm just excited.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And just thanks for being here. When we first met, probably a couple months ago now, and we all went around the room and did introductions, I'm always listening out for potential guests, I should say. And when I heard that you worked in the field of sobriety coaching, it caught my ear. And I also know you have a very established background as a licensed professional counselor as well. So maybe we can just start with where you find yourself now and maybe work backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
But I thought where you find yourself now in your life, even and in your work
Yep.
life too.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love the working from now to backwards. We usually do it the other way, right? I find myself in a very unique period right now. The past few years have definitely taken on its own journey that I had never imagined. Recently, I shared with the world I'm 16 and a half years sober. So that was just something that was called to me intuitively. I felt like there are people that are suffering in silence. When I really have learned through my private practice and my personal experience how to maintain long-term sobriety and really the keys to staying grounded in that. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and business owner. So it's been interesting. And so that's where my work evolved and why I decided, okay, I want to go from just my licensed professional work, my counseling work, the DBT I do, into more of a coaching arena workspace, as well as public speaking and community work. Really, it's an extension of my purpose, which I truly believe is grounded in helping people.
How wonderful.
A big part of this was about 2 years ago, still sober. I really got out of alignment with myself without even recognizing it. And it was through the busyness. It was nothing bad, just the busyness of motherhood and showing up everywhere for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even realize it. And again, one of my defaults is hyperproductivity when I'm in fight or flight, when I'm in my trauma response. And then I had a moment with my daughter where she came to give me some love. And I was like, I didn't feel that. That's not good. What's happening? So it made me go back a little bit and dig a little deeper and go, what's happening here? And what I realized is I had lost my spark. So though I was doing, it was not in alignment with myself. And it really just made me go a whole nother level inside. How do I actually sit still? How do I slow down and still be able to do the things I do, but really with more intention and alignment? And
Great questions.
I just feel like that's so much more powerful and impactful.
Wow. Yeah.
Versus that busy bee doing that
Absolutely.
I'm so used to.
Yeah. And I'm wondering too, because I was creating just a list of questions that we had met prior to this for an hour last week, gotten to know each other. And I'm thinking about your journey and how on the journey we can make these great colossal changes and behavioral changes in our life. And it's not a one and done thing, right? It's like we can have these different moments of sort of awakening or a change calling from within. Because one of the things I was thinking of, if we do backtrack to earlier in your life, and there's so many different directions to go here.
Yeah.
But when you found yourself in a place where you were identifying with the outer world and using substances. I'm assuming, I don't know about your sobriety journey
Yeah.
in particular, but did you feel like that there was a call within, there was something calling from within that led you to the beginning steps of sobriety?
Oh, absolutely. I was young. I was 24 when I stopped drinking. And so that was my substance of choice. So really early on for me, it was fun. It was what my peers did. That's what we did.
Yeah.
And then it continued for several years, but then it became not fun. It became a way of coping, celebrating, a way of when things didn't go right, also like numbing. And it just became a crutch, an unhealthy crutch for me. And also when I would go out or have friends over or whatever, I would do things that I wasn't proud of and that I would feel icky about that Nisha aligned wouldn't do or say. And so it took many nights of those or moments of those to where really I got to the point where I was like, okay, I've always been connected with my higher power, always. So I was like, all right, God, help me figure this out. What am I going to do? What am I like? Oh no, and I did the whole like curiosity thing of like, I'm going to limit it. I'm going to stop for a little bit. Like young me, young 20 me was doing these like little games with myself, mental games. Right. And then I just had a moment, a really rough night. And I was like, all right, God, what are we going to do? And I knew at that moment, it was like, I was either going to continue to just like lead my self-numbing party lifestyle and not fulfill my purpose, or I was going to go the other way and make a trail and blaze a trail and go fulfill my purpose. And I was
That's
determined
incredible.
to fulfill my purpose. So, I did the unthinkable. I called my dad. I tell everybody the story because it's the funniest story. It's one of my favorites. And I was like, hey, Dad, I think I have a problem. And he was like, what? And I told him, and I think you need to pray to God and get closer with God. And I said, I did. And he told me to call you. And my dad was like, oh, like he didn't know what to do, right? Like Indian girl, his
Right.
daughter. What? Like we knew it ran in the family, but never female and not like your own. And it was just, but they surrounded me and loved me and gave me the support I needed to heal and the space too, which was hard as an Indian family. Giving space is difficult sometimes.
Wow.
But they did.
And even in that, just rewriting whole ancestral and cultural narratives right there.
Yes,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. And coming forth in your truth and honesty. And I'm thinking of my younger years and dependence on alcohol. And what really strikes me is how young in culture we can get involved with drinking. And I'm sure you have a lot of really beautiful and unique thoughts on that. And it continues. I think it's been around for decades and decades. I remember my own father being known as being a partier, but just like those kind of storylines, but the awareness and your ability to say, the ways that it's making me feel, how I act when I'm under the influence. You'd probably be able to say all the ways in which I can look back and share a choice I make in my life now is not to drink much. And I think what happened to me was that I would do and say things that would make me feel incredibly ashamed in the next day. And those things what I carried with me for so long. It was like these stories that I could not.
Yeah.
And I had no way of working through it at the time, the shame and I find myself now making healthier choices for myself.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways I went almost the other way, and my story is different than yours, but almost the other way because I couldn't tolerate those feelings of feeling so ashamed anymore.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I commend you. And obviously it's your path. Like you're saying, it's my purpose. It's why I'm here. Something drove me forward. It was that inner voice, that inner knowing, and it allowed you to be so honest and courageous.
It really was. I think I always say when we ask and if we're open to it, it may not be the path you want.
Yeah.
But if you walk through that door, you'll get your end goal or what your end purpose is. Because yeah, it's so interesting. And it's funny you say about the shame and the guilt internally. I recently met up with my college girlfriends. I hadn't seen them in like, I don't know, probably 10 plus years. And we were all just like laughing and storytelling. And I was like, oh my God, y'all, I was such a hot mess. And one of them was like, actually, no, I didn't realize that. You were always like put together and you looked great. And in my head, I was like, were we saying the same thing?
Yeah.
Because internally, I think you're right. There's so much shame and guilt because we know. what's in alignment and what's not, no matter what it looks like to the outer world.
That's
And
so
so
true.
the
Yes.
stories I told myself or that I was like cringing on, she's like, oh no, like you just look like you always had it together. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I did,
Mhm.
but I didn't think I did.
That can be, I think that's an important point because it's easy to look at one another and project or have this idea or story that if you look a certain way, then all is well. And then even if
Yes.
sometimes people are presenting on the outside and they don't look so great, like we make judgments about that. And so we'll never really know unless someone shares with us what they're going through.
Yeah. And I faced that
Mhm.
early on in recovery. And it was just like old time people that I'd run into. And obviously, Indian girl in recovery, young
Mhm.
looking, like, what are you doing here? Did you get in trouble? Is this a court thing? Like, none of the
Yeah.
above.
Mhm.
And it was like, I had to prove that I earned my seat because it didn't
Mhm.
look like I earned my seat. That was a really interesting experience
Yeah.
for me to be like, what do you mean I don't look like I belong here? Like I belong here.
Right.
I could, and I didn't want to share all the stories to prove
Yeah.
where I was. But
Mhm.
then I found my tribe of women
Mhm.
and people, even men, that like I didn't have to prove the hurt or like my bottom. It was
Yeah.
low enough. They just loved me where I was. They knew I felt broken, even if I didn't look broken.
Yeah.
And they were like, love you till you can love yourself. And
Yeah.
let's walk this path, which
And
is
yeah,
amazing.
it's beautiful. And I see you almost as a person who's here to guide others who identify with that questioning earlier in life. Or we always, with guests, I'll always do the intention settings when we
Mhm.
begin, right before we record. And I think you said for those people who may not feel heard or feel seen and heard, may this recording be a place where they see something in themselves. But it is that quality of, because when we trace back to the behaviors we had, and maybe even now for some listeners, but how I was thinking about how we reach to the outer, and the outer can be alcohol, it can be weed, it can be shopping,
Shopping,
it can be pornography, it can be sex, it can be like anything, that it could be over exercising. All these
eating,
eating,
unhealthy
absolutely.
eating. Yes.
Yeah, all these outer places we go. And so when you look back, do you see that younger Nisha who was searching for something, yet she just didn't know how to get those needs met yet?
Oh my God, absolutely. So for me, I got a late diagnosis of ADHD.
Mm.
It's something I'd struggled with since I was a kid. I played soccer 3 hours a day outside, a day. I was always outside and always moving. But my mom always
Nice.
got those notes at school, talks too much in class, like always had those. But when I got on the soccer field, everything got quiet. I had one
Mm.
focus and I could just relax and do what I needed to do. And it wasn't till again, the past few years, I was talking to my best friend who's known me through everything. She goes, I bet the reason you liked it is because it quieted your brain down.
Mm.
You actually got to have fun and have one thought versus 20 thoughts and being the little child adult you were. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was it. It just gave me the peace.
Yeah,
So
it brought.
yeah, I think that's what it was. I think it was that calmness that it brought me. It allowed me to just be and not always do. And that it allowed me to also have fun, right? And so I think that's the purpose that it really did serve for me. I don't think it was like anything like, oh, to numb out something bad. I really do think it was to help with just all the hyperactivity going on.
Mhm.
And it was fun. And one of my core values, funny or not, is freedom.
Mhm.
And so I just naturally had come up with these like crazy rebellious ideas, not because I want to be bad, they're just fun to me.
Right.
Or when I drank, it allowed me to do some of these fun ideas. Whereas now I'd be like, okay, Nisha, like rational
Uh-huh.
brain, not a good
Yeah.
idea. Let me loose, let that part of me come out a little bit more or run with those ideas.
He gave you some permission to do that.
You gave me
Yeah. Yeah.
permission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure as you rework, because we're always reworking some of those values that,
Yeah.
or the conditioning, I guess, we grew up with. And it's okay, now I'm an adult. What's mine and what's not mine? So, how can you create that magic in your life without it having to be crazy risk taking? Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, because I used to say, oh, I was such a rebel. I was such a rebel. And
Right.
over the past 6 months, I reaffirmed it. I realized my core value is freedom. And freedom can fall under that. Absolutely. But
Mhm.
you're right, it's rewording it. It's how I live freedom out today is way different. Freedom of time for me, freedom of choice for me,
Mhm.
being creative, doing things like this, freedom to
Yes.
tell people my sobriety story. It goes in
Absolutely.
many, it can be a positive thing.
Yes.
It does not
Yes.
have to be something that's negative or where you're breaking rules and breaking laws. It didn't have to be that.
Yeah. I know that in your sharing of your story, that's after 16 years of not, that there must be just new conversations, new things coming into your life. But I want to ask too, when you decided to go on the path of sobriety,
Yeah.
how did that look for you? And did you have to, because we hear about the 12-step
Yeah.
programs and the different, is that the route you initially took? And how do you feel that, because what it really strikes me is the commitment that is made when someone is changing a pattern or habit that's pretty ingrained, that because you don't always get, I feel like when it's with alcohol or drugs or something that is really has this potential to be disruptive in different ways, right? Because if we take
Yeah,
an addiction like shopping, it doesn't alter our mental state, but it affects our lives. It impacts our relationships
absolutely.
for sure. But what was it, that commitment that you needed?
Yeah. So for me, it was 12 steps. I got into full recovery. I did individual therapy, I did group therapy. The way I put it, or the way it was put to me is like, as hard as you worked to like drink or like get a drink, sneak a drink, the amount of times you thought about it or whatever,
Mhm.
romanticized it, you should work that much harder to keep your sobriety and create a foundation.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I will get clients, I'll get execs that are busy and they're like, I can't go to meetings and I can't do this and I can't do that. And that's where I come in. I'm the bridge. I'm like, it doesn't look one way. When I got sober, it really was just
Yeah.
maybe one or two ways to do it. Now there's so many ways.
Mm,
So I'm not like, oh, you must do it this way. You must do it my way. Absolutely not.
yeah.
I believe that you do need a community, but you can create your community of people. Right? And that's I'm like, I could be part of the community. You could have a friend, family
Yeah.
members, somebody, if you're in church or wherever you go, then maybe some 12 step or maybe smart recovery, whatever it is for you, therapy. But I do believe that you can make it work. It doesn't have to be as it once was or the way I
Right.
did it.
Mhm. Yeah, there's
Absolutely
so
not.
many more offerings and modalities and strategies to do things these days, and I always reflect on the podcast is bringing those ways forward and
Yes.
having individuals come and share what's out there for them. But having someone like, a person's corner has to be just incredibly supportive to have walked that road
Yes.
and know, how it feels. And I hear you really saying that you let your clients lead and they show you the way as much as you show them the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I will hold space for them. If you're in sober curious and you're like, it's not as bad as it used to, I'm getting better. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I won't force you into your day one. I cannot. You have to decide when it's your day one.
Yeah.
And then I will support you along the way. I'll walk with you.
Okay.
But I'm also warm and I'm honest. If you're wrecking your life and you're still not at day one, I am gonna say, hey, listen, you're wrecking your life.
Yeah.
Here's here are the choices you're making. What can we do to help you get there quicker or help
Mm.
you,
Mhm.
right? What are some things? Because it's not always gonna be so black and white of putting down the substance. For example, I had a client who would drink once a week, but they had liver stuff, right? And I was like, "When do you drink? Actually, tell me about this, because it's not every day, but once a week, but that once a week is getting to you."
Yeah.
And they were like, "It's at night and when I'm
Mhm.
bored." And I said, "Okay, what if you just went and tried a meeting or went to a place where people hang out, whatever, a clubhouse, there's one near their work." And they said, "I could." I said, "Go at the time that you wanna drink. Just go hang out, see what happens. You don't need to talk because they were like, I don't want to do that." And I was like, okay, don't go talk. Just
Mhm.
go sit there, listen. You might make a friend, you may not, but you won't be bored.
Mhm.
And they said, okay, I'll try that. And they tried it a few times.
Yeah.
And they
And it
got their
helped.
first, yes,
Yeah,
they got
it
their
helped
first 60
disrupt.
days.
That's gorgeous. I'm thinking about how difficult it is, how addiction to alcohol, we'll just take that, can be very
Sure.
disruptive and hard on family structures. And so, if a listener was listening in today and has someone in their family, whether it's a parent or a
Yeah.
partner or a sibling, going through difficult times with the reliance on alcohol. Let's just take that for an example.
Yeah.
What can we do? What can one do? Because we know at the end of the day, it comes from within the person themselves to
Yeah.
get to where they need to be, to have that day one, to seek the
Yeah.
support. But what can we do? What's the most supportive ways to go about it?
Yeah. Supportive ways you can go about it is have an honest conversation, non-judgmental. Remind them first that you love them and that you know they're not a bad person. I think a lot of times where we go wrong is we're like, you should fix this, you should fix that. This isn't good for you.
Mhm.
And then comes the I care for you.
Yeah.
Let's start with the love first. That person already probably doesn't feel like they're a good person. There's that guilt and shame. So let's remind them, hey, we know you're good. We know you're lovable. You're making these choices that are hard to watch. Obviously, professional resources are always great, right? Get support for yourself. I've had loved ones come into me first and then have their spouses come in
Mm.
because they start getting the support and help. They start learning
Mm.
because, I teach people protect your peace. If it is, let's say you have a spouse that goes socializing or y'all go to dinner parties and then they take a little too far every time, instead of covering up the next day or if people are calling, you just go, I don't know, would you like to speak to them? Oh, you'll have to ask them. Take it off your plate. Cover what you need to. I know they just had a rough night. I know. You could talk to them about it. I haven't had a chance yet. And then for them, do some research. You're more than welcome to reach out to me. I am happy to help. Just even get a list of things of here's some options for you
Yeah.
and present them and go, here, I've done the research. If you can't do it
Mhm.
yourself, here you are.
And then it becomes up to the person as to
Yes.
the readiness factor.
It really does. It's hard to watch loved ones just continue to do the cycle over and over.
Mhm.
You do sometimes have to separate yourself. You have to
Yeah.
let them fall and trip and get really scraped up, which is scary, but you're also getting them closer to their day one of sobriety by doing that. When you
Wow.
catch them,
Yeah.
you clean them up just enough that it's not that bad, and then they can continue again.
I like it too from the standpoint of really infinite possibilities
It
and
is.
a lot of different avenues is what I'm hearing you say too. Yeah. I
It's
love
not
that.
one size fits all.
Yeah.
It really
Mhm.
isn't. I know I don't have like that direct, but it's not. It depends on the family, the dynamics, resources. There's just so
Mhm.
much. But for that
Yeah.
individual that's listening for somebody they know that's struggling,
Yeah.
also you can just send them if they like podcasts, they're smart individuals or whatever, send them
Yeah.
some things that might motivate them or where they can feel relating,
Okay.
material that they can
Mhm.
relate to where they are.
Yeah, and I love that how you started with you're a great person, you are loved because that's the perfect backdrop and sort of gentleness that we all need. So much of your even around this topic is the commitment to self. It's something that we're all working on going towards.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of what's coming to mind too, how with adult populations because I'll just ask you about there's a common thought process when you've got kids in high school and college that they're
Oh,
just
yes.
going to drink. They're just going to drink. They're going to drink a lot.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I believe that research shows that high schoolers, teenagers are more apt to risk take. But what do you know about the place of alcohol in their lives and the guidance we give as parents and even how we can guide them along the process?
Absolutely. I think education without judgment, number one, right? Have the conversations with your children. Have them go, hey, I know you're going to dabble in stuff. Go ahead and call it out. I know you're going to do these things. Let me tell you a little bit about our family history, especially if there's addiction in there.
Mhm.
And it's important to acknowledge it, or there's mental health.
Mhm.
Hey, a lot of kids, families, parents, people don't know alcohol is a depressant.
Yeah.
So when people consume alcohol, and it doesn't have to be immediate, it could be the next day, it could be 2 days later, that gray cloud will linger.
Mhm.
I've seen college students who have unfortunately tried to take their lives under the influence, but then when they sober up, they're like, I don't know why I did that. I would never do that. And we, again, had to observe their relationship with alcohol before removing it. Because
Okay.
these are people that are heavy in Greek life. So they're
Yeah.
not going to just all of a sudden be like, yeah, I'm going to see Nisha and get sober.
Right.
We had to do a lot of observation and testing and trialing, right? Before they go, oh, this is not for
Uh,
me and my genetics.
yeah. I love it.
So
This is such a good conversation. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's that educating them, letting them know non-judgment. They can come. A lot of these newer drugs and stuff, they're laced with things. I think
Mhm.
telling them, hey, guess what? You may try, I don't know, vaping or something. Know where you get it from. Be smart, kid. People are you're gonna eat a gummy. Where did it come from? Ask. No. But to just blindly go, my child won't do that. Oh, we don't do that. I think is very naive. Parents, don't be naive. Like sometimes it's the whole like, well, make your home so exciting that they're going to want to stay in the home and not go out. They spend a lot of time out, let's be honest.
Right.
And I had this discussion with my 8-year-old. She was like, I was turning 40.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, you don't have adult beverages, mom. And I was like, no. She's like, but dad does. And I was like, yes, he does. And she's like, but we serve him in our home. I was like, yeah, we do. She goes, oh, okay. Will I drink one day? And I was like, maybe. I don't know if you decide to. And she goes, well, why don't you? And I told her, I said, I don't like the way it makes me feel.
Yeah.
It doesn't make
Mhm.
me feel good and I don't make good choices. And she was like, oh, okay. And I was
Great
like, so I
model.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how it's going to work for you. It's fine for your father. Open dialogue. Even that young. I mean, they ask versus being like, oh no.
Yes. Yeah. I love this conversation today because it's the first one I've had about
Ah,
sobriety on
yeah.
the show. And I know that your work encompasses many other things as well, but just I feel like that it's the conversation that's not being had when people get to midlife, even like you say 35 to 40 to 65
Yeah.
or 70. And especially in that like middle sweet spot when drinking can really become just so pervasive at social events and how that can kind of spill over. And I caught up with an old friend just a couple days ago and they had said I stopped drinking 6 months ago and I just said I really appreciate you sharing it with me and how incredible
Mhm.
you are and that you're making that life choice for yourself and I stand with you in that solidarity, but I feel like it's the conversation that's not always being had. And then the longer that goes on, it can be harder to break. So I just love that we're having the conversation today.
Same here. I think you're right. I think it's so common in our culture,
Hmm.
right? It's everywhere. Brunching, book clubs with wine clubs, dinners, company parties, corporate things. How do you navigate it if you're taking a step back? I've had people message me and they're like, so, I'm doing dry January, but I want to extend it, but I don't want to be weird or like I have to go to a wedding. And what
Hmm.
do I do, Nisha? Like, how do you do it? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that's weird for people because I'm so comfortable in my sobriety. Like even before I shared
Absolutely.
with the world, like, I went through that weirdness early on, or the awkwardness, the awkward feeling of
Hmm.
uncomfortable. And,
Hmm.
here's the few quick ones of like, hey, if you're going to, let's say, a holiday party, go ahead and talk to the bartender beforehand and just go, if I come to the bar, make me a faux drink.
Okay.
They're going to remember you and it'll look like a regular drink, right? I think it's just like little tips like that and you don't have to over explain. For me, I recently went to a gala and one of my aunts was like, so wait, you're not going to drink there. And I was like, no. She goes, so like, what do you hold in your hand like the whole time? And I was like,
Right.
nothing. My hands get cold. I don't want anything in my hands. She was like, oh.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
was
and
like,
that's
this is
so
funny. What do you do
I
with your
know.
hands?
It's so and I know we're not the only culture, but it makes me think of that point where we have to look at ourselves and say, "Who am I doing this for?"
Yeah.
Because if you're at that place and you go along with the crowd, but you're having that sense, I imagine that there's like almost like a tipping point or like there's just a stage when you're in that stage of trying to decrease it in your life if you're not going full out
Hmm.
like I'm day one, right? Is
Right.
that when you're making that choice is who am I doing this for? And again, that kind of I was thinking before we met like, oh, I wonder what Nisha's like universal kind of themes are, but I think they're
Yeah.
just coming out. And I think like one of them is we have to do it for ourselves. And if it makes someone else uncomfortable in any way,
Mhm.
that's their discomfort for them to be with, that you don't have to take on the energy of someone else's
Mhm.
discomfort.
That's it. You don't have to take on the energy of anybody else's discomfort. And I think, I love how we started the podcast with an intention. And I think for those who are scaling back, who are in their sober curious journey and who are about to hit holiday season, connect with your intention before going into the event. If it's the intention of having one drink, connect with that, connect with the why, connect with the feeling of doing so. and like having a night, like, at the end of the night, how proud you'll feel. Connect with that before stepping in. Because I think that will also help guide your decision making.
And putting energy
Yeah.
and seeing how you are growing and that self-appreciation that comes from the things that I think we all know this, but it's the little things that are really the huge monumental things. It's not the
Mhm.
big things.
It's definitely not, it's the baby steps. It's the tiny wins that start building that confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And so, what has changed in your life since you came into this period of really allowing yourself to be seen?
Oh my gosh, what's come into my life? A lot more like fun, joy. I think as cheesy as that sounds, I'm able to hold space for more people, but also taking a step back and holding more space for myself. Even before you and I got on today, I worked out and then I was like, oof, I need to like disconnect from everybody. My husband's off. And so I sent him a little message being like, hey, I'm just going to put my phone on, do not disturb. I'm fine, but I'm a little peopled out. But I really want to do this podcast, but then that's it. And he's like, oh, okay. Because I love this.
Yes.
But sometimes it's like the day-to-day dings and the needs and the wants. And it's like the ability to just go, "Oh, okay, I can do that, and the world's not gonna fall apart." I think that's the
Mhm.
gift.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like it's like you're talking about like, okay, outer connection, and that fulfills me in certain ways, but then go back to the inner connection, and it's that
It is the dance.
dance of what makes you feel in alignment. Uh-huh.
It
And
is.
that's a feeling.
It's a
Mhm.
feeling of slowing down, which is not my natural state, but I love it.
Yes.
Like, it is
Yes.
becoming my natural state now, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
versus
That's
that busy.
I feel like that's very interesting. We grow and change, obviously, when we're from teens to, where we find ourselves now. But that, the Nisha who needed the 3 hours of the soccer field and the movement to find the inner peace. Like if you go the
Mhm.
20 to whatever it is, 30
Yeah.
years later now, and what does Nisha need now in order to feel the peace and calm? It's so beautiful. It's such a testament to how the work and the inner work and the commitment for
Mhm.
ourselves to thrive really creates that peacefulness inside. And I feel like I hear peace and clarity named so many times as to what someone is looking for. Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it,
Yes.
right? And it doesn't look one way. I think different phases of life require different things, Sometimes I am a fast-paced person in general, but I know that there are outlets where I get that out. And a lot of times also the labels don't help. Like I am bubbly and I am energetic, so people automatically assume, "Oh, she's an extrovert and she just wants to be out." But now I'm like introverted, even though I have this big bubbly personality. I need that quiet time, so it's interesting being like, oh, yeah, okay, so removing yourself from these labels and having to call yourself something, I don't do that. When people are
Yeah.
like, I let people tell me what they think I am, and then I'm like, yeah, in the middle, I guess, somewhat, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever you want me to be, it doesn't matter.
And can you be all the things, right?
Yeah, exactly. It just depends
And
on the day and the head and the heart space.
yes, yes. And Christina Trefero, if she listens to this, who I just met through also Dara's group, she reminded me the other day that if you did something yesterday, you can do something new today. And just because we've done it in the past, it doesn't, and that can be with anything. And it was this statement that was permission to be like, oh, what do I feel like in the moment? What do I want to choose in the moment? So if someone else had all these expectations of you in the past, guess what? Maybe not today. Maybe not
Yes.
right now. Yeah.
And that even goes
Mhm.
with like circling back to sobriety. You
Mhm.
may choose it's not for you right now and today. Good for you. And then a year later, you may choose differently.
Mhm.
Know that you're just choosing for today.
Mhm.
Like not next week, not next month. Like if it's not working out for you today, just don't do it. Try not to do it today or get help with it today.
Yeah.
Let the future take care of itself when you get there.
Mhm. As we are circling towards the end of the conversation today, we didn't really get to the part where your work, I think what I see is the journey you've been on and what you've sort of, healed in your life and integrated from the past and everything allowed this really big expansion for you. You were saying in your work, you're trained as a licensed counselor with different modalities you work
Yeah.
with and then getting into coaching. But I see that you getting in touch with your own purpose is that's one of your things that you love to do with people as well. Coach them on,
Yes.
support them in. But and that can encompass like a lot of different areas of life, but it's really I don't know how you put it, but it's really stepping into the highest version we're meant to inhabit while we're here. But if you want to say a little bit about that and what that means to you.
Yeah, I love that. The highest habit. I think it's in the higher self and the higher purpose. Again, I think it comes with that freedom. It's not a box. Like I do have the modalities that are like evidence-based and like very therapeutic heavy. But then I also work a lot with intuition and natural healing and spirituality, Reiki, oracle cards. I pull that in my work, energy work. That is part of my calling. That is part of who I am. And
Yep.
so when I have a client, I don't just look at them as, okay, they're fit in this little box. It's more of like, what part of me can meet their need? Which toolbox? And sometimes it's a variety. It just depends. But yeah, the more work I'm doing, the deeper it's going, really more intuitively focused for sure.
And the more comfortable you get with yourself, the more comfortable. I find the same thing, the more comfortable I
Yes,
can be with a client. And that allows us to access our intuition
it does. It
without
does.
without having to do anything. Yeah.
But that's exactly what it's ever been. I'll have clients that are sometimes like, how did you know? And now I have a few of them that are like, you're just magic. And I was like, okay, sure. That's what they like to call me. And we
That's
just laugh
beautiful.
together,
Yeah.
and I laugh and I welcome it. I'm like, I've
Mhm.
got the skill side and also
Yep.
the magic side. They're like, you do. And I'm
And
like, it's
that's
fun.
your yeah, and it's your
I
perfect
love it.
alchemy. It's who you are.
It is. It's a
Um,
perfect bridge
it
for
is.
sure.
So I always ask at the end before where to find you, but anything that's still on your mind that you want to leave with the listener, any parting comment or
Mm.
thing that's coming through.
I will just say for listeners, whether you're a loved one of somebody that's struggling or you're one that's struggling, protect your space and not in an unhealthy way, but more in a healing way. Even those that are starting to dabble in sober curious or whatever that may look like for them, like even protect your recovery. I didn't share for the longest time because I was taught that. Protect your
Mhm.
recovery. Unless it needs to be shared, you don't need to share it. Doesn't need to be yelled out at the mountaintop. It doesn't. So, yeah, that's what's coming through for me is just reminding
Okay.
people it's okay to have healthy boundaries.
Thank you. That's huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Huge. And where can the listener find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Nisha Patel Coaching or check out my website. It's theniche.com.
Ah, I love
Yeah,
that. Thank you, Nisha, for being with us. And thanks to the
absolutely.
listener, as always, for being here. If you have any questions or want to seek Nisha's work, you know where to find her now. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit maureenspielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.